I know it's been 2 months since Mass Effect Legendary Edition released, and so I know this video would have limited value as a review for a remaster. However, I recently concluded my playthrough for the Trilogy, and I wanted to do an appreciation style video just the same, because this remaster provided me with the perfect opportunity to revisit one of my favourite trilogies in gaming for the, I don't even want to count how many times it's been, and if you're new to Mass Effect and thinking about diving in, provides the perfect opportunity to do that as well. Considering for the price of one game, you're getting 3 Mass Effect titles, all of its DLC, barring Pinnacle Station, but it was shit anyway, and one hell of a memorable ride. And on top of that, there's a sturdy remaster in here as well. And I didn't want to let it go without laying down my appreciation somehow, and like I said, I would have done this video sooner, however I was too busy playing the game. Not that other content creators didn't do this, I'm just saying we all work at different speeds, and mine is decidedly quite slow of late. Of course, most of the visual and mechanical improvements are experienced within the first third of this journey in Mass Effect 1. Now, if you played Mass Effect 1 back when it released, and this was the first time you played it since, then I could understand you saying you didn't necessarily notice a difference, because it sort of looks how you'd remember it. However, I recently replayed Mass Effect 1 not too long ago, and the thing I could appreciate was the fact that the differences were actually night and day. I don't really want to do a graphics comparison because realistically, this video has been released far too late for it to necessarily matter because you've already seen the comparisons. The game still feels old, of course. A remaster's purpose isn't to modernise the game's feeling in every single way, and it will still look like an older game even though it's been remastered. However, the updated visuals and mechanics certainly help make the game more accessible in 2021, and while the visuals are there for all to see, the one thing that you need to really feel to understand better is the mechanics of the game itself, and how minor changes have been made to Mass Effect 1 to improve how it plays. Mass Effect 1's combat gameplay was definitely where this game struggled the most to keep up with the times, and I think it would take a fool to go into this remaster necessarily expecting a modern shooter experience. Yes, it still does feel aged, it still feels like Mass Effect 1 in a way, but the gameplay tweaks present here certainly do help make the combat in Mass Effect 1 much more enjoyable. Aiming feels more responsive, and there's certainly plenty of rebalancing in there, including altered environments to provide more cover, especially in boss fights where that lack of cover could get annoying. Most of the refine in the gunplay is quite subtle. For example, the melee attack is no longer triggered by the same button that allows you to fire your weapon, which just gives you greater control over what you're actually doing in any situation. It's also funny to willingly and deliberately clark people out. Despite all these minor adjustments, it's still at its core the Mass Effect 1 combat gameplay, and I think that's the best way. The game still plays like Mass Effect 1, it just looks a lot nicer and has a touch more refined to it. Another aspect with huge changes is the Mako, and by huge I mean you don't lose control of it as often. It's still the Mako, and it still feels a little wonky at times, and so you still get that lovable vibe that Commander Shepard is just a shit driver, but it certainly ironed out some of the more annoying aspects to trying to control this machine. You now have 2 boosters as opposed to just the jump thrusters. You can also boost forward, and they charge separately, so you can use them together if you so wish, and it just makes certain aspects of navigation a little bit easier. Aiming during gunfights while in the Mako is also a little bit easier, as you don't need to be facing where you're shooting at with every weapon, and it just feels a little bit more reliable and responsive in that respect. The HUD also looks nicer for those who care, and ultimately the experience that is Mass Effect 1 has been vastly improved. Visually it's most notable in these open spaces when you're in the Mako, because in the original Mass Effect 1 these spaces could be somewhat barren. However, that is not the case anymore, as if nothing else, those visual improvements have added some atmosphere. That's not to say these spaces are modernised open world areas, they're almost certainly not, but it's definitely enhanced the experience that is Mass Effect 1, which was definitely my preference, and for me, somebody who played the game before it was remastered several times over, I have a lot of appreciation for the minor improvements that have been made to have major impact, in a way that keeps the game from straying too far from what Mass Effect 1 is at its core, while also making it accessible to a more modern audience. Makes you think maybe this game didn't age as badly as I thought. Because besides from the better textures, the mechanical improvements and class rebalancing, this game is still at its core the Mass Effect 1 that I loved. It's the same story, the same atmosphere and world building, the same characters, the same adventure, simply revised revitalized and improved. It doesn't play like a 2021 game, it doesn't feel like one, nor does it look like one, nor is it trying to be. The remaster of Mass Effect 1 shines a light on what used to matter to video games before technological feats were the be-all and end-all in a video game's value. Not necessarily unjustly, I mean if the tech's there, fucking go crazy. But it's clear to see that what mattered in the development of Mass Effect 1 all those years ago was creating this story, creating these characters, developing this world building. And whether you're playing the remaster or the original, that focus still takes center stage. Come Mass Effect 2, the focus for the remaster is a lot less on visual improvements and more so on hiding Miranda's ass. I'm joking, that's not the point I'm trying to make. The biggest improvement for Mass Effect 2 made it much less of a stressful experience, because this is notoriously the game where if you get it wrong, you can literally screw up everything. And that then in turn makes Mass Effect 3 a more depressing experience than it needs to be. And how it does this is by rebalancing the game's morality system in a way that makes it actually predictable for everyone rather than just for people who know the game inside out like the back of their hands and have a great order for how they play it. Paragon and Renegade morality skill checks weren't exactly new in Mass Effect 2, however they could be a little tricky to unlock at certain points, because it wasn't necessarily measured by how high your Paragon was or how high your Renegade was, and was more so measured by how often you chose Paragon over Renegade, and then how many of the overall skill checks in the game you actually did. And that's one of the simple ways of describing it. I'm likely not hitting the mark 100% because I don't really understand it fully myself, I never have, and attempting to comprehend it has given me many headaches. But even if you get it right, it may still bug and lock you out of important dialogue decisions. But now with the remaster, this morality system has been simplified to what makes sense so that that doesn't happen. Now Paragon and Renegade is simplified to how high your Paragon or Renegade stats are, and provided they're over the criteria thresholds, there's no issue when it comes to using those skill checks. This gives the game an actual margin of error instead of actually trying to play it getting every single decision correct so that you don't fuck up one dialogue decision and then fuck up the rest by extension, and also gives you more freedom to delve into more Renegade choices even if you're going for a primarily Paragon playthrough. So it takes the stress off Mass Effect 2 where it's not necessary, as even then the experience is still quite intense, what with timers between main story missions and sometimes consequences if you put them off for too long. With minimal points where you can go off and do only the side stuff without the main story looming over you. The benefit of this improvement being you can now actually make sense of how the morality system in Mass Effect 2 actually works, but even then you've still got to lean into a primarily Paragon or primarily Renegade playthrough, which is a positive because it doesn't make the entire game piss easy, it's just one less unnecessary thing that can fuck everything up for no reason. This allows you to invest yourself with a bit more agency in how you approach going about playing this game, if you want the best outcome to the inevitable suicide mission at the end, which allows you to invest yourself more personally in the experience without feeling like you have to do everything perfectly or you're retracing maybe 10 in-game hours of content to find out where you screwed up. And there are some priceless Renegade moments in Mass Effect 2 that don't necessarily undermine a Paragon one, that will be a shame to miss even on a Paragon playthrough because they're simply too brilliant.
You're working too hard.
There are visual improvements to Mass Effect 2, obviously. If you looked at a graphics comparison, you'd see tons of them. Then there's the unnecessarily intense lens flares, which is just kind of typical for a remaster, really, isn't it? But I think the benefit of playing the remastered version of Mass Effect 2 over the original version is the fact that you don't have to purchase all the DLC separately, which I think is a massive benefit to Mass Effect 2 and 3 especially, and I feel those expansions are kind of important when it comes to experiencing the full experience that is the Mass Effect trilogy. I'm not on about the armor and gear stuff, I'm on about Project Overlord, I'm on about Arrival, getting Zaid and Kasumi as well, so there's definitely a positive in the convenience. Like I said, the visual improvements are there, but really they're just a nice bonus on top. Mass Effect 2 is a brilliant game anyway, and it hadn't aged badly to begin with, and its main reason for being in the remaster is the same as 3's, because you have to remaster the entire trilogy, otherwise you're not going to go anywhere with the story you start in Mass Effect 1, as your progress carries over. There are improvements to Mass Effect 3 in colour shading and in the textures. If you're playing with a 4K display, you'll certainly notice them, but Mass Effect 3 hadn't aged awfully for a game that released in 2012, and so the biggest selling point at this point is the fact that you don't have to install all of the expansions separately, and so you get to experience Mass Effect 3 in the best possible way, that being with all the expansions and the extended cut ending, which was released to improve the end of the game, which was controversial at first and still is. They haven't completely reworked the ending, much to the behest of a lot of people, but realistically I think that would have been naive to expect, and I personally think the extended cut ending is fine, though I perfectly understand why a lot of people might not agree with me on that. But again, the main reason why this game was remastered at all is because you couldn't release a remaster for Mass Effect 1 without intending to follow that up and go somewhere with the progress you make in Mass Effect 2 and 3. The story isn't complete without all three parts, and that was understood by BioWare and EA. There are enhancements, it's not just the same game remade, but my point is, without the dire aging of Mass Effect 1, there would have been no need to remaster Mass Effect 2 or 3 at all. But when it comes to the biggest actual improvement that you'll notice in the remaster, for me it's the galactic readiness, which is now impacted by decisions that you can make in both Mass Effect and Mass Effect 2, which is also now simplified to no longer require an app that was back in use when Mass Effect 3 initially released, and is no longer in use, I believe. You know, back when companion apps were a thing that existed for some reason. And there's no more total effective military strength on top, it's all based on the galactic readiness, and so galactic readiness is the only thing that's important, and that primarily builds based on how much of the game you actually play and the decisions that you make along the way. This simplification improves your chances of getting the best possible ending, but at the same time you still need to actually play the games, which I think is a much better system than having some things locked behind a stupid companion app that nobody ever touches, and it's good to make the side content important by rewarding the player for doing it, even if it's in a way that they might not necessarily even notice because they're naturally going to do that anyway. A huge shame for Mass Effect 3 in the remaster is the fact that the multiplayer didn't make a return. I was never too clued up on it, I didn't really involve myself in it too much, but apparently a lot of people really liked it, so that is a bit of a sad one. But all in all, it's still a serviceable remaster inside a brilliant bundle, and that's where my overall appreciation for the Mass Effect Legendary Edition really lies. It gave me the perfect excuse to play an enhanced version of one of my favourite gaming trilogies of all time, and I also got to see a lot of people experience this trilogy for the first time and completely fall in love. So not only is the Legendary Edition the perfect excuse to revisit this great trilogy, it's also a reason for people who haven't played it before to give it a go. I understand these words would have had a greater impact maybe 3 months ago, however, this franchise isn't over yet. I know it got rocky with Andromeda. With the trailer back at the Game Awards months before the remaster even released, we know that BioWare and EA intend to continue this franchise, and courtesy of what that entailed, we know it's going to be a little closer to home than Andromeda was. And with reports that the remaster sold better than EA expected, with its CEO stating that it's reignited the passion for fans, I think it's safe to say that there's definitely potential for a bright future ahead for Mass Effect as a brand. Will it capitalize on that? I don't know. BioWare hasn't exactly inspired confidence in recent years with Mass Effect Andromeda or Anthem, but maybe this remaster is the indicator for a greater turning point. And so for a newcomer looking in, now's as good a time as any to get stuck in and see what these brilliant games have to offer. So if you're watching this video to see what the fuss is about, then what are you waiting for? That brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you all for watching. I really hope that you've enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be super fantastic. I know that this video has come very late, especially considering this remaster released 3 months ago, and I understand that. I just wanted to get a video out showing my appreciation for this franchise and for this remaster, and I had something of a crisis of creativity of late, so it did take me a while to get around to actually doing it, so I'm glad that it's done now, because now I can focus on going seeing family over the next week or so, but also rejuvenating my content a little bit in a way that makes it suit the algorithm and also me, if that makes sense. I look forward to doing that, but now there's one less project that I've left unfinished. I actually started making this video like a month ago and then stopped, so I'm glad that I got around to finally finishing it. Regardless of all that waffle, it's now time to end, so thank you all for watching again, and I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, take care and goodbye.